Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with another catch-up wrap-up. Don't know what number it is. Content warnings are listed down below, as well as other links to people, videos, channels I mention. Let's get into it. The first book I finished was How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy by Jenny Odell. This is a nonfiction book that is exactly about the title. It's about like the practice and the idea of doing nothing and how subversive that is in a capitalist society. She talks a lot about the attention economy, and I really liked the way that she discussed that. I really connected with that phrasing and sort of her like ideas around the what an attention economy is. Like, I think she puts into words a lot of frustrations that I've been feeling about the monetizing of people and of our time, and I really liked that. I should also mention that I listened to this on audio. The narrator was Rebecca Gibble, and I thought she did a good job. And Jenny Odell also weaves in some of her own kind of personal experiences as she came to realize these things. I personally didn't feel like it took over the story. Like, I thought she did a really good job of like weaving those into the topics she was talking about, rather than like derailing it to, just share a personal anecdote or something. And I really liked some of the examples that she used. And, she talks about like these different like proverbs from different cultures and what those things say about productivity and what is a worthwhile life or way of living, and I really liked some of that. I also really liked some of the historical parts that she talked about. I also really liked the way that she wove in some like stories or examples from other disciplines like natural history or natural sciences. Like there's one about like the trees in like the really massive like trees in California that I thought was just really moving and very like interesting and a cool way to like discuss the things that she was talking about. I do think that this is one of those nonfiction books where part of your experience with it is going to depend on how much you connect with the specific examples she chooses, because there were some of the art installations she talked about or those experiences she shared. Some of them I really liked or I really connected with, or I thought they were really kind of like well explained and well connected to the things she was talking about. And then there were some where they just didn't, I feel like I keep saying the word connect, but they just didn't connect with me personally, and so that kind of, those parts of the book didn't have as much of an impact on me, even though I might have appreciated the underlying things that she was saying. In some of the chapters where she gave these examples that just didn't work for me, I don't think I got as much out of them, if that makes sense. But I still thought this was very well done. I definitely think it's going to like affect the way that I view or articulate some of these ideas. And yeah, I really liked it. I gave How to Do Nothing 4 stars. Next, I finished Dr. Thorne by Anthony Trollope. This is a very chunky boy. This is such a big book. This was our Past It Classics pick for, I think it was February maybe. I will link that live show down below. I was the host. Taylor and Julie and I had a lot of fun discussing this book and picking it apart because, spoiler, we did not like this. I really struggled with it. We happened to pick 2 books for the first couple months of the year that just did not hit with us at all. So this is in the Barchester series, but you can read it as a standalone or out of order, which I did read this one out of order. So Dr. Thorne is the title character, and he is in a way the main character, but also sort of not. So he's a doctor who has this like long-standing friendship and connection with this the Gresham family, who used to be very wealthy, and they are not anymore because of some very bad luck, but also a lot of bad just decision making from the men in their family. And they've like fallen on hard times, and they're still like very high society. They're very like influential in the community, but they don't actually have a lot of like financial power anymore. And so he's been friends with this family for a while, and then we are also following his niece, Mary Thorne. So she and Dr. Thorne are very close. Actually, one of the highlights of this book for me was their relationship and how like tender it was and how much they cared for each other. Just a really beautiful family relationship. And Frank Gresham, who is like the son, the heir of the like, well-off family who is no longer well-off, he is in love with Mary. And Mary is penniless, and we also find out, or actually we know, I think from the beginning of the book, that she is illegitimate, which the Greshams don't know, but like that's another sort of impediment to their relationship. But Frank is determined. He wants to marry Mary Thorne, but there's a lot of reasons why this would be difficult or impossible. And then Dr. Thorne ends up being in a very difficult position because he has sort of like privileged information where he knows, like through no fault of his own, he wasn't trying to discover this, but he knows that Mary is going to be inheriting a ton of money. And so he doesn't know what he should say about this. And what I thought the main like focus of this book was going to be was on that sort of decision and that conflict, and kind of on the idea of like, should he speak up so that they can get married and be happy, or should he wait and see if like how much they care about each other? Because like Frank Gresham, it has been drummed into him since he was a little boy that he has to marry money. Like that's a huge deal. His family is really pushing him to do that, especially his mother. And basically he's grown up his whole life knowing that the family fortune depends on him. And one thing I do appreciate about this book is that we do see that pressure could be put on young men as well. Like, I think I definitely have a tendency to focus on that as something that would affect young women, and maybe not think about the fact that, like, young men could also be, you know, pressured into making loveless marriages. And, of course, there are, like, differences in how that would affect people and everything, and, like, the difference in, like, social standing obviously is a factor. But I do like that this book sort of, like, points out, like, it's not a good thing for anyone, you know? So anyway, I thought the book was gonna be about that, and really... it's not really, like, I struggled with this so much. One of the things that this book ends up being is just a massive, like, expose of the dangers of drinking and, like, alcoholism, which I thoroughly agree with that. And this is something we talked about in the live show, where it's like, I do really agree with Trollope's point about, like, you know, overindulgence in alcohol being a really bad thing that can really hurt people and families. And, like, I agree with everything he's saying, but I think the way he went about it was not always great. Like, there were some parts of it that were sort of, like, surprisingly, like, forward-thinking for the time, but there was a lot of other ways that it worked into the story that I just didn't appreciate. Okay, I feel like this is going to be a very, like, all-over-the-place review because I have so many, like, frustrated emotions about this book, but the things that I did like, I liked the writing and the humor. I think that Anthony Trollope is a very funny and entertaining writer, for the most part. But there were, like, some good moments of humor here. And like I said, I really liked the relationship between Dr. Thorne and Mary. I actually really liked Dr. Thorne as a character. He seems like a very, you know, upstanding, a good guy. But unfortunately, pretty much everything else did not work for me. One of the things that I struggled with so much... Oh, I should mention I also listened to this on audio. The narrator is Simon Vance. I personally would specifically not recommend him as a narrator because his general narration voice was fine. It was good. But every single voice he did for a female character was so bad. Like, it was excruciating to listen to. And even some of the voices he did for the male characters were also, I think, very unpleasant and just weird choices. But especially for the women, it was so bad. Like, the reason I kept listening is because I was struggling with this book so much. And I'm like, if I have to finish this physically, I don't know if I'll be able to. But yeah, anyway, personally, would not recommend the Simon Vance audiobook. Anyway, so one of my big issues was the characters and the characterization. Apart from Dr. Thorne, who I liked, but who wasn't really, like, he was the protagonist, but he also wasn't the character that most of the story was about. Like, the whole book sort of hinges on this relationship between Frank and Mary, and they had almost no personality. Like, okay, actually, Mary had, like, no personality. Frank did have some, but it was insufferable. Like, I really didn't like him. Like, at first I didn't have many opinions about him at all, but the only time we see him actually, like, not being boring is when he's being, like, kind of the worst. And, like, okay, there's one part I just cannot get over, and this is technically a minor spoiler, so if you want to skip this, go ahead. But I cannot get over the fact that at one point we see Frank almost beat a man to death, to the point that his friend has to pull him off, and the policemen who show up are like, don't leave the city until we know if this man is going to live or die, and we need to, like, prosecute you for murder or manslaughter. Like, that's how intense this scene was, and it's like, no big thing. No big thing. Nobody cares. No one views this as like, wow, this is maybe, like, an anchor problem that you should work on, and not something super appealing in a love interest. So, I didn't like Frank. I will say that the character that was the shining light for me in this book was Miss Dunstable, who is this very, very wealthy woman in, like, she's one of those rare people who was able to, like, rise above her station, I guess, because her and her family are merchants. Like, they have to work for their money, you know, which is so shameful. And normally that would kind of lock them out of high society, but they are so incredibly filthy rich that even the snobs are like, okay, I guess you can hang out with us, because everybody's after her money. And I freaking loved her. She was a delight. She was so, like, funny and just clever and vivacious and kind. Like, she's the best. I resented the way that the book was kind of trying to make us feel like she was, like, not that we shouldn't like her, but, like, that we should look down on her a little bit, because she's, like, she doesn't have many manners, she's a little tacky, and it's, like, I mean, I think that's mainly down to, like, the difference in, like, social manners and practices between our time and when this book was written, because I just think she's a treasure. I love her. Anyway, so she was, like, one of the highlights, but otherwise, the characters did not enhance this experience for me, because we have that romance that I did not care about, and also that romance, like, the whole thing that is set up as the premise of this book doesn't even happen for more than, like, 300 pages. Like, the way that the book is summarized makes it sound like the inciting incident is this potential romance and the, like, inheritance of the money thing. That doesn't even fully happen until more than the book, like, more than halfway of the book. I think that is a really poor choice. Like, you guys know that I don't notice pacing super often, and so when I complain about it, it's really bad. This was, like, atrociously paced and so slow and so boring. It was a real struggle. And I know that, like, the person who did the summary obviously was not Anthony Trollope. Like, this is, like, a modern edition of this book. But I just don't understand that choice, because it makes the book drag even more than it would have, because, like, we're waiting for the thing that we thought was going to be the point of the book. And it's not happening, and it's not happening, and nothing's happening. And then finally it does happen, and it's, like, super underwhelming because none of the characters are super well written. And then also another big issue I had was with the way that the themes were handled, and this is, like, one of my main struggles with all of the Anthony Trollope books that I have read so far. I really can't tell how much of the things that he writes are, like, commentary and how much is just, like, his own prejudices, like, bleeding through into the story. Because, like, I am shocked to find that this book is often referred to as, like, a really insightful commentary or critique of class and classism, because it really doesn't read like that to me. Like, it seems like it's going to for a while. Like, and there are some places where I think it does do that. You know, there are some interesting, like, points made about the, like, social standing of certain characters versus what they, like, deserve, and, like, who is believed to, like, deserve money and things like that. But I feel like the way that things ultimately play out in the story completely undercuts any of that was maybe happening or going to happen. And then, like I said, I don't think that the alcoholism was handled super well, at least not consistently. And then related to that, one of the other characters that I thought was interesting and had potential but was just done so dirty by the book was Louis Philippe, the son of the wealthy family member who is, like, going to leave Mary all this money. And the reason this happens, and I don't think this is a spoiler because they, like, basically tell you this is gonna happen, since the will is even brought up. But Louis Philippe drinks himself to death, essentially. And the way that the other characters, like, talk about him and interact with him is so unpleasant. Like, Louis Philippe is not a great person. Like, I'm not saying that, like, I love him, but I just think that the treatment of him is pretty messed up, especially, and this goes back to the thing about, I don't think this is a book that really is criticizing classism. So especially because the narration, or, like, Dr. Thorne himself even is, like, thinking after he dies, like, he is genuinely sad, and he is, you know, he feels for his mother especially, but he also thinks to himself, like, well, now Mary's gonna get all this money, and really, she can, like, she should have had it all along. Like, she's gonna be better at this. She deserves this money more anyway. And it really, like, it had the vibe of those people who it's like, you can't give money to poor people because they just spend it on drugs, you know? So that's what it felt like. And also, it was extra irritating because one of the only things we know about Louis Philippe is that he's actually very good with money. So it wasn't even, like, there was no factual basis for it. Yeah, so that I didn't like. The treatment of women, or like the sort of overall discussion, I didn't really like. Like, it wasn't as much of a focus here as like in Can You Forgive Her, for example, so it didn't piss me off as much. But it's still, I don't know, like, I really liked and I really felt for Louis Philippe's mother. And I really hated the way that the story was trying to make us think that she was, like, dumb, or that we should be, like, embarrassed for her. Like, it really bothered me. And then the other thing about, like, how incredibly long and boring this book was is, like, it's not just, like, how long it took for the main story to happen and then how, like, little stuff actually happened, but there were a couple of other things, like the minutia of this, like, very tiny, very local, like, election and all the, like, politics around that. Like, personal politics in a story can be incredibly interesting, and, like, I don't think it's just because I'm not English and so I don't understand, like, all of the context. I think it's just written in a way that is so uninteresting in this book, and it's also about characters and about plot lines that don't matter. Like, there's no reason for us to have this kind of detail about these characters or these situations, because they don't matter in the book. And, like, not only do they not matter, but there's no, like, interest factor to make it feel worthwhile, even though they don't matter. And the other thing is the amount of, like, backstory and setup that we get for the Greshams is exhausting. Like, the book starts and the narration is like, oh, I gotta give you some backstory on these families and why this matters, and that is fine. Like, I understand that. We have to kind of understand, like, the financial situation of these families to understand why the conflict is a thing. So I get that. But it wasn't just, like, the first chapter. It was the first, like, was it like 100 pages? It was a long time. And we started with, like, Frank's, like, grandfather, or maybe even before that. I don't know. There was way too much detail. We didn't need it. I was so bored. I did not have a good time. I give this 2 stars. Like, I'm like, should I just give up on Anthony Trollope? I don't know. Yeah, I did not have a good time with this one. This is a lot of people's, like, favorites, or, like, one of their favorite novels of his. It's been my least favorite so far, and I have a small sample size, but still, I had a bad time. Anyway, if you would like to hear even more ranting and complaining, check out the live show that me and Julianne Taylor did. Next, I finished An Improbable Season by Russell and Eves. I read this one in preparation for the second book, which I received as a review copy, and these are companion books, but as I say in that review video, if you have an interest in both of them, I would definitely recommend reading them in order, because there are some plot things that are spoiled in the second book. So this is a historical fiction that has multiple points of view and multiple kind of plot lines and romances, and I loved this so much. Like, I feel like I am just gonna really click with Russell and Eves and the kinds of, like, romances and, like, characters that she writes. So we have 3 young women who we are following as our point of view characters. We have these 3 young women who are all really close. They're good friends. I think it's 2 sisters and 1 cousin, and they're all very close to each other, and they're all going out for their first London season together, and they all have very different reasons for wanting to do that. Thalia wants to make her mark by publishing her poetry. Kelly, or Calliope, she really wants to just throw herself into the season. She loves this kind of thing. She wants to, go to parties and meet young men and find true love and get married. And then their cousin Karis has been submitting writings anonymously for a while, for, like, scientific papers and things, and she wants to really make her mark there, so she doesn't really have an interest in the social scene. But they get there and things get almost immediately very mixed up and very complicated, because Calliope ends up in a compromising situation that means that she has to have this, like, arranged engagement with somebody that she's not interested in. Thalia seems to be doing well with her poetry, but she gets caught up in, like, the parties and the atmosphere and maybe spending some time with people that she doesn't know as well as she should. And then Karis is actually, like, the toast of the town. Like, everybody loves her and Karis doesn't know what to do about it. And there is a romantic angle for her as well. And I just loved this so much. First off, the female friendship, top tier. I loved it. Even when we have, like, some conflicts between the characters, I feel like it was never in the sense of, like, girls tearing each other down. Like, it was like differences between them as people, not like, oh, girls are so catty, they can't be friends. And there's a big difference there. I really loved these girls individually. I felt for them so much. I really love that we have a character like Calliope as one of the main characters, because I feel like, at least in maybe this is starting to change a little bit in the last year or so, in the last couple years, but I feel like a lot of like modern historical fiction really focuses on main characters like Thalia or like Karis, who it's like, I hate the London season, I hate the social scene, I just want to do like other things that girls are not expected to enjoy. And those are incredibly important stories as well, but I feel like we don't often see main characters who like those things, you know, who like being feminine, who want to fall in love, who like parties and dressing up. And it was just nice to see like these three very different women all being treated as like equally important and their goals as being equally worthy. Or when people view them as not being worthy, that's clearly like a problem. That's something that we're not supposed to agree with. I also really, really loved the romances. Like, Karis and her relationship, I think, is really, really well done. I really enjoyed their interactions, and I loved Calliope's even more. Like, it is a like marriage of convenience kind of thing, and it's extra complicated because the young man who she gets paired with has been really in love with her sister Thalia for a very long time, and so it is very messy, very complicated, and Callie also has somebody else that she's maybe interested in, so like the two of them are not thrilled to be kind of like pushed into this situation to try and save Calliope's reputation. But the development of that relationship is so good. The development of all of these characters, I think, is excellent. I really enjoyed the writing and the setting. I feel like it was personally a really good balance of like having the historical background. Clearly the author did her research, but also I don't think this would be intimidating if you were somebody who maybe doesn't pick up historical fiction as often. And I'm just like a sucker for some of these like romantic tropes and character tropes, so that was like an added element, but I loved this. I gave an Improbable season 5 stars. Next, I finished Wat Kept Playing, the inspiring story of Wataru Misaka and his rise to the NBA by Emily Inoue Huey and illustrated by Kai Kang, or K Kang. This is one of 2 books that I reviewed together in one video. I will link that below. This was an advanced copy that I got in exchange for an honest review, and I really, really loved this. I'll show you a little bit of the art style, and as somebody, like, I'm not super into basketball, I don't know much about it, I don't really follow it, and so for me to still really love this and be super engaged with this, I think is kind of extra impressive. And so it's about the first, I think he was the first Japanese American, he might have been one of the first Asian players or the first Asian player in the NBA, and it deals with that experience, of course the racism and discrimination he faced, and it also deals with World War II and the internment of Japanese Americans, so it weaves that into his personal story and his sports accomplishments in a way that I thought was really engaging and really well done. And you might have been able to tell, there's like, this isn't one of the picture books where there's like just a few words on a page, not that there's anything wrong with those, but there's just different kinds. This one has more text, and I think that really contributed to feeling like a really good, like a pretty thorough biography for a picture book, which again are short. Yeah, 5 stars. I thought this was excellent. And then the other arc that I reviewed in that video is An Inconvenient Letter by Julie Wright. This is a proper romance, and I really, really liked this. This has like some of my absolute favorite romance tropes, so when I get into the premise, you might you might know why I was sort of like expecting to enjoy this one. So our female lead is Marietta Stone, and she has secretly had a crush on one of her neighbors for a very long time, and she like wrote a letter as sort of like a diary entry, and of course it gets discovered or accidentally sent. And then Jared Hartwell is our male lead, and he is the cousin of the man that she's in love with, and he sort of intercepts the letter accidentally, and this gives him an idea of how they can like work together, because he is planning to court Marietta's older sister Anne, and so they're like, well, if we pretend to be like dating and spending time together, then that'll give us an excuse to like be in the company of the person that we actually want to, because of course they had to like, you know, set up situations where that would be socially acceptable and all of that. But of course the longer they spend together, the more they're like, maybe I actually have feelings for this other person. So we have fake dating, which is a trope I enjoy, and we also have sort of a like version of the matchmaker trope, which is one of my personal favorites as well. So I really liked the use of the romantic tropes here. I really enjoyed Marietta and Jared as main characters, like separately, and I really enjoyed their relationship and their interactions. I also, like I said, that I really enjoyed the romantic tropes and their use here. I also think that there were some pieces of the story that were done in a way that I don't often see with these kinds of tropes, which, you know, I say a lot, tropes are not bad things. They are just ingredients for a story. So it doesn't mean anything bad to say that a book has tropes or that it uses tropes. But I do think it's kind of cool how sometimes, like in this one, we have certain elements that I am used to seeing done a certain way, and it happened a little differently, so I think that was cool. I also really like the writing of this one. I'm excited to pick up more things by Julie Wright, because I think I like her style and like the kinds of characters and like tropes she uses, and I also really enjoyed like the friendship and family elements, and like there were some things about the like interpersonal drama between these two families, because we find out some history that they have. There was some stuff about that I think was resolved a little too easily, but it didn't bother me too much because I just really enjoyed this, and yeah, I liked where the story went. So I gave an Inconvenient letter 4 stars. Again, check out my review for more thoughts. And then finally, the last book I'm going to talk about today in this little mini wrap-up is The Giver by Lois Lowry. This is for my Not a Genre book club. My friend Julia from Shakespeare and Such is going to be my guest or my co-host for the next several months, and the first thing we're doing is reading and discussing the Giver series, which is one of Julia's all-time favorite series, and it's one that I've never read. It's a very like classic dystopian, like a lot of kids grew up like reading this and loving this series, and I just had never gotten to it. So this is my first time. You can maybe tell by the tabs, but I loved this. The only thing I really knew is like the most basic premise, but the kind of overall setup is our main character is a young boy named Jonas, and it's set in this like utopian society that of course we start realizing is not a utopia, but he is getting his assignment of like the job that he's going to be training for, and he gets chosen to be the next receiver of memory, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is one person in their community who holds the memories like of humanity basically, and through Jonas's experience and training with this old man who the title The Giver refers to, who's the current or the previous receiver of memory, through Jonas's training he starts realizing a lot of things about their community and about what it means to be human. And I feel like a lot of the things I'm trying to say about this book sound incredibly generic, but I found this so incredibly moving and well done. I loved Jonas as a main character. By the way, we have a whole live show, a very long emotional live show on this book, where me and Julia discuss it, so please check that out. But yeah, I think one of the reasons that this book and middle grade books in general can be overlooked is that people take the fact that the writing style can be less flowery to mean that the ideas are less deep, or that the story is less well told, and that's absolutely not true. I feel like The Giver is a really strong example of how a pared down writing style can be so powerful and so intentional when it is done correctly, and I feel like that writing paired with this story and paired with Jonas and his journey, it heightens the emotion. And like the discussion of like language and the precision of language, the fact that the language of the book is also very precise, I think is so smart. Yeah, I just like the themes of this book, the themes about memory and again about like humanity and like emotion and empathy. It's so good. Like I don't read a ton of dystopian, I'm very picky with it, but I thought this was absolutely fantastic. I feel like I'm forgetting a bunch of the things I wanted to say, so again, check out our very long, very thorough live show, but I gave The Giver 5 stars. I mean, like, look at the I had like a lot of things to say and a lot of feelings about this book. Okay, so that is everything for this short little catch-up wrap-up. I'm gonna see if like doing these in shorter chunks helps me catch up quicker. I don't know. Let me know if you have read any of these, what you thought of them, or if you're interested in any of them. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!